All right, welcome back to our live podcast here at the Apartment Academy here at Apartmentalize 2022. We brought along David Friedman, Friedman Realty Group, to talk a little bit about their company. You guys are developers. No, well, you're owner-operators, not
Correct.
developers.
Correct.
You're typically acquiring assets already built, yeah?
Yeah, usually 1960s, 70s suburban garden style.
Got it. And what, just generally speaking, David, what are you hoping, like when you go to this show, for those that maybe have never been here before, what are you kind of hoping to see? What are you looking for today?
Well, sometimes we can all get caught up in our day-to-day and our routines and be very insular with our thinking and, kind of head down, not really looking outward at what's coming or what's out there. So for me, personally, I started coming to this 6 or 7 years ago, and it was something I found was really reinvigorating, giving meaning and purpose to a larger industry and, who we serve, what we serve. And there's a lot of learning. The education's great. You get to see, it's like a local state association on steroids. Everyone brings out their best, absolute best. So it's really fun and exciting to see all that.
Yeah. From a technology standpoint, this I think this has always been the place to see the cutting edge of what operators might be adopting in the coming years. Is there anything like that you're looking for when you're here?
Absolutely. So usually when I come out here, very open-minded, but try to have a couple of intentions and purpose for the visit. This year, a lot of what I'm focusing on and looking into is AI, leasing, and technology. And I would say a year or 2 years ago, maybe it's on the radar, but it's not where it is today. And there's so many people in the space, and it's easy to kind of get lost in just what everybody offers. So just trying to learn what it is. Because it sounds like it's a way of a future.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a technology that, as you said, still isn't mature, but really came into its own during COVID. Like the idea that we didn't necessarily need somebody there at the property to like take a tour and successfully lease a property, and that notion that we had that we always needed people at the property seems to be dispelled a little bit, and that's kind of where AI is coming in, no?
Yeah, and you hear a lot about how it's difficult to find good people for help, and how site teams have been more challenged with more on their plate. And look, residents, it's tough for them as well. So, really when we look at it, I think we do a nice job with our operations. So for us, specifically when we look at or consider AI, it's not necessarily what kind of NOI or revenue boost are we going to get. It's how can we give a more precious resource, time, back to our staff so they can focus on higher value things. So that's the promise, and that's hopefully what we can kick some tires on. One of the things we'll do out here.
This morning we had Christy Fickert on from RealLink, who was talking about this notion of being able to, through remote leasing, to be able to have better resources spread across more properties, so you could do better leasing more consistently and pay them more, because in bulk you have fewer leasing agents, but they're doing a better job and you can pay them better as a result.
Sure, and what you're talking about, like centralized leasing. Yeah. So I've heard people talk about it. That's not something that I've really looked at for us. I don't know if we necessarily have the scale or even maybe the right properties for that. But certainly, that's a lot of what I've heard with how difficult it is to find talent.
Yeah. So the marketing landscape, the leasing landscape has certainly changed in the last couple of years. But as an acquirer, an operator, just talk a little bit about how the acquisition market has changed during that time. So pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, what's happened to deal flow for you?
So, certainly over the last 10 years, it's been pretty much a nice bull run for the industry. And the last acquisition we made was at the very end of 2020, pretty much like a day or two from turn of 2021, in the middle of COVID. And that's a little over 300 units in Philadelphia suburbs. And at that time when we bought it, it was I would say 60% occupied, very heavy value add lift of probably $70,000 or more per unit that we were going to do. And even at that much capital that needed to go into it, and that level of lift for the operations, still pay full price at that point. When we're looking at our underwriting, there's no there's no cap rate to consider because that's at that it doesn't make sense. And I feel like the market's just gotten a little more nonsensical since that point.
It's gotten worse.
I've seen stuff listed that they're great properties in great areas. They check the boxes of exactly what we would want, kick the tires on some of the underwriting, and can't make anything make sense. And talking to some people and trying to understand how are people making these work. I've run these numbers, and I'm not really sure what they're doing. Maybe they're hoping and praying on some pro formas. We'll see with interest rates going up what's going to happen over the next couple of years, especially with some people who might have short-term or floating rate debt that's going to mature.
Yeah, so I did some time with a developer in Los Angeles, and we used to always get nervous anytime we won a deal because it's like, what mistake did we make in underwriting? Because anything that was properly underwritten never seemed to really pencil as an investment.
Yeah, I always have a mini moment of panic after our offers get accepted because we are the guys that are paying the highest price for this property.
Yeah. That's right. So are you able, what does your crystal ball tell you about pro forma rents for the next, 2 years or 3 years? By the way, do you have a typical holding period or these long-term holds?
It'll depend. My dad, who's out here in the audience, he has a joke. He doesn't get buyer's remorse, he gets seller's remorse. So, these are, as a family, usually generational for us. Certainly there are properties that will sell, but he's had his oldest property longer than he's had me. And there's sometimes properties where, we feel it's the right time to let it go. So it'll really depend.
All right. Okay. So you're not operating under the same pressure that some REITs might operate under that are like 3 to 5 year hold period and they've got to churn the property.
Absolutely not. For us, in the way we operate our business and execute on our plan, we see a lot more benefit to a longer term horizon. And certainly that doesn't meet with everyone's expectations, but that's how we found we've been most successful.
Well, let's talk about that for a little bit because not to get too technical with folks, but properties that are acquired on an ROI basis, not cash on cash return basis, often incorporate the exit.
Yes.
And the accretive value of the asset itself. In a longer term hold, you're really just talking about your return is really just a cash on cash return. Is that the correct way to think about it?
We'll look at both components, and really, even if we have a longer horizon than a 7-year or 10-year model, because most of the time when we put debt on a property, it'll be a 7 or 10. Especially with historically low interest rates recently, you really want to lock those in. But just to understand if it's a good investment, we'll look at the cash on cash, but at the same time, we're also considering a terminal value because we want to look at the whole thing holistically. So we will try and figure out what is that accreted value as well on top of the cash on cash.
Got it. And what's an acceptable return in the interim prior to considering terminal value?
Prior to considering terminal value?
Without considering terminal value, what would be your expected, let's talk about using the terms cash on cash return until you sell the asset?
So I would say it'll depend on call it the risk profile of the property, but somewhere between 7 and 9% is usual for us. I would say usual. This is an unusual market, so I've heard a lot about for people to make deals work, you really have to compress that. So haven't really gotten comfortable with where that number is these days, which is why it's been a little over a year since our last acquisition.
Yeah, 7 to 9%. Is that in your model generally highly leveraged? Almost. No, well, you said 7 to 10 year loans, so those are pretty short-term loans.
Yeah, so we're doing pretty traditional financing when we do this stuff. We're not necessarily doing anything that's groundbreaking. So leverage points for us are usually 75-80% loan to value.
Okay, so typical. So is that an ease? Can you find those deals these days?
It's really challenging. People are really paying up for properties. Rent increases have been really, really high. Certainly that comes with rising costs on the expense side, but it's how long can you underwrite 6% plus rent growth? When's the music going to stop? I don't know. So that's a hard thing when you're looking at these deals of how high can I really push them.
Yeah, that brings me back to my question. I interrupted myself, which was your crystal ball. If you if you can't underwrite based on today's economics on a return because it just doesn't pencil, what can you get comfortable with in terms of rent growth underwriting to get a deal to pencil? And you're saying traditionally it's been about 6%.
Well, I would say traditionally, so for us, we're looking at value add. So we're putting money in.
Right.
We're doing things that focus on kitchens, bathrooms, but also trying to find ways to have energy efficiency. So if there's a boiler system, doing some high efficiency boilers, energy controls, etc., and obviously better and more efficient operation in addition. 3 to 4% is more of a stabilized after you do your value add.
After the lift,
and
yeah.
The value add is really going to depend on the market. What is the current operator doing with their asset as far as rents? If you put your money into it, how high can you go? What does the market bear? And that, right now, first year, 2 years, you can go 6% plus depending on what it is, but how long?
In your value add plan, in your value add, like your capital expenditure plan, are you doing anything differently now when you think about adding value to property that is accommodating kind of the lifestyle changes that we're seeing now in multifamily since COVID? Like Kate Good was here talking about the digital nomad lifestyle. Is that playing into your capital plan now?
Certainly a little bit. I mean, the way we operate and strategically what we tend to buy are Class B apartments, very much workforce housing. Usually our apartments don't have much by way of amenities. They're not Class A luxury. At the same time, we do have some properties that have that, but we are more so looking for amenities, services for people to make their lives easier. We've done stuff, door-to-door trash removal. We're trying to find ways to add, outdoor space with playgrounds, dog parks. Very traditional on one hand, but on the other, we've seen a huge demand and spike for those kinds of amenities and a lot of appreciation from residents when those, as simple as they sound, when they're there and available.
What about services that really are focused on resident engagement, like getting people to get together socially, or coupons to the local restaurants and that sort of thing? Is that people said millennials care more about that now. Have you found that to be true?
I think people like the community and the engagement. Certainly, like the rest of the industry, a lot of our properties took a little hiatus from pulling people together. I would say this year is really the first year since 2020 that we're kind of getting back into that swing with bringing people together. So one of our larger properties, we have ice cream truck and an ice cream social for the residents.
That's fun.
They love it. They really love it. And it's great. It's a beautiful property. Big, huge pool right out in the front. So it's an event that they always look forward to.
So on balance, hard time to get into multifamily investing, or is there any part of this, is there any silver lining to this?
Time heals all wounds. So if you have a long horizon, who knows? We don't have a crystal ball, but if you're able to get into it, still be smart and careful. But look, at the end of the day, you're going to have to take some shots. But if you have a good business plan, you have an asset, you hear location, should do well.
And you guys Friedman's generally focused in the Northeast, yeah?
Right now our portfolio is Greater Philadelphia, all suburban, but certainly open-minded and having conversations with brokers and people for trying to step out a little bit from our current geography.
Any markets that for the audience listening, any markets that you're paying attention to, maybe you've not invested there, but you just feel that the economics there will be favorable for investing in multifamily?
Usually outside of our general region, I'm not as in tune, just because I don't, at least right now where we are in our company, I'm not really interested in getting on a plane, let's say. Me personally, I like the idea of going maybe a little more south, less snow removal to deal with and ice and whatnot. But Maryland is of interest, Virginia is of interest, and where I am, a lot of real estate is controlled by families, and there's not a lot of transactions. So the opportunities for purchasing are a little more scarce, whereas some of those locations in Maryland, Virginia tend to be institutional ownership, so it's a very transactional market. Certainly you have to pay attention for anything that you go in and buy, but that's where I'm hoping to look.
And for syndicators right now, is it a more difficult time to find investors who will participate in syndicated deals, or is that just strong as it's ever been? People always are in search of a good investment.
I hear a lot of different feedback. There are people who will invest with us. They've been with us for years. They know what we do. We've produced strong returns. So if we tell them, they don't ask a single question. They just say, how much? And there are others where if I talk to, they would be used to, for years and years and years, earning a certain return. So if there's been compression in the industry for the investment, there's certainly some socializing that has to be done to get them comfortable with maybe what would be an evolving market.
Yeah, there's a lot more uncertainty now about like rent growth and all that than it probably ever has been. Well, David, I'll let you get back to the show. I thank you for sharing with the audience some of your insights about investing in multifamily. It's been really insightful.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate your time as well.
Yeah, great seeing you.